Hey everybody, this is Marcia from Everything Wine and More. Welcome to our virtual tasting series. We've been focusing on Canadian wineries the last part of June and now into July. We just celebrated our nation's birthday last week. And what better way to keep going with that than with an amazing winery in Southeast Kelowna called Spearhead. It's actually one of my favorite wineries in the area. And I'm pleased to be here with Grant Stanley, the winemaker today. So we're just going to talk a little bit about your winery here, Grant, and taste some of these amazing wines. And hopefully those of you that will be watching this, the tasting room is open. So please make sure you go visit and taste these amazing wines for yourself. So, hey, Grant, nice to have you.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, awesome. So you have a bit of a storied history as far as winemaking and where you've been around the world. And you actually weren't born in Canada. So tell us where you were born and what brought you to the Okanagan.
Sure. Well, I was actually born to a couple of New Zealand immigrants in Vancouver a long time ago, 1967. And I had the luxury, I guess, of having a New Zealand passport. And the ability to live and work in that country along with Australia as well. And so I took that opportunity in my youth. I guess I was about 23 at the time, and I moved to New Zealand and I studied winemaking and got involved in viticultural research. And at the time in the 80s and the 90s, New Zealand was like the epicenter of kind of, I don't know, modern viticulture and modern winemaking at the same time. So I'll put it down to very good timing. I ended up studying at the Marlborough Wine School in Marlborough and did an internship with the largest winery in the country, Montana Wines, with Brancott Estate. And after a few years, I ended up moving to Pinot Noir country, looking for smaller and smaller and smaller wineries after working in the biggest winery in the country. And I settled at a winery, a Pinot Noir icon in New Zealand that was some of the earliest planties called Atarangi Vineyard. And I had the luxury of working with, one of the top winemakers in New Zealand, Clive Patton. For 8 years, I was there as the assistant winemaker, beginning as an intern and following through to assistant winemaker. I really enjoyed my spell in New Zealand. It was a fabulous experience, and obviously, that time in New Zealand was very progressive, and I learned a lot of great things. I also, during that time, while I was sort of studying and kind of learning the trade, I had the opportunity to come to Oregon, California, and Burgundy to do Northern Hemisphere vintages. It's one of the kind of in the Southern Hemispheres is that, the North is kind of a good place to go and kind of cut your teeth and work for other winemakers and get a couple of months experience in places. So I did that for 3 years. And on one of those trips in 2001, I traveled to the Okanagan and I tasted with Ben and Tony Stewart, with Tom DeBello at Cedar Creek. And I kind of traveled through the Okanagan, specifically looking at Pinot Noir. And I certainly saw some great wines and some great hope for Pinot Noir as a varietal in the valley at that time. Back to New Zealand and continued on with my career and what I was doing there. And in 2003, I had a phone call from Ben and Tony Stewart asking me if I'd be interested in coming out and interviewing for the position at Quailsgate. And so I gratefully accepted. They sent me a plane ticket, which showed how serious they were about it. And I came out for a full week in July of 2003. Had a look at all the vineyards and was very excited by what I saw there. Went back to New Zealand, decided to accept the position. And not too long after that, people were showing me front page news about Kelowna burning in the fire and asking me if this is the place you're going to make wine. And sure enough, I did arrive and it was a pretty crazy kind of opening season with, obviously fires throughout the valley and, some crazy stuff happening in the Okanagan. But that was the beginning of my time here. And I had 10 great years working for the Stewarts at Quailsgate and growing the Pinot Noir program there, really kind of cementing Pinot Noir as one of the key varietals in that winery's lineup. And after 10 years, I had an opportunity to go as a partner and work at a winery in Lake Country that was just developing, called 50th Parallel Estate. And again, got in at the ground floor there and had the opportunity to work with the architects to build a gravity feed winery there, and develop a wine program that was, again, based around Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Riesling. My favorite three varietals to work with. So after a few years there, it was kind of a tricky situation. The winery was growing and developing, and I was quite happy to be a part of that. But I really wanted to focus on single vineyard wines, and that's ultimately what I kind of see as the future of great Pinot Noir in the Okanagan. That the identity to the place, having vineyards and different vineyards that show differently. And I'm kind of inspired, and had the experience with Ken Wright Cellars in Oregon.
Yes.
And Ken was one of the kind of early pioneers of this concept of having, multiple wines in the portfolio that are all from either growers or from, estate vineyards, but are definitely either clonal or site orientated, with small production. So I kind of took Ken's thoughts, and I really enjoyed that whole concept, and I've always wanted to get back to that. And I met Bill and Marina many times throughout the years here, the owners, Bill and Marina Knudsen, the owners of Spearhead, and we came to an agreement. Must have been about just at the end of 2016, that I would come here to Spearhead to become the general manager and the winemaker, so that I can kind of have a little more control over the whole situation going forward. And so I did that, and I've been here now since 2017. So I finished the 2016 vintage, and I began in the little old building that we have here, the original yellow house on the property. There's a little cellar in the basement there, and I began making wine there in 2017, which happened to be an outstanding vintage. So I was very, very fortunate that everything came out. We ended up with some beautiful single vineyard wines in 2017. And throughout 2017, we embarked on building a new winery here that is specific for boutique small lot Pinot Noir, and that took place over a year. And so we moved into the new facility just before the harvest in 2018, and we've been in this building ever since. And it's a true joy to work here, because we kind of have everything set up and everything kind of in a nice place. A very, very, very tight, small team. And we're making 7 different Pinot Noirs. 3 are single vineyard wines, and the others are clonal selections. The Cuvée is our top Pinot Noir, and of course the Chardonnays and the Rieslings and the Rosé and the other wines that kind of go along with the portfolio. But it's not a huge portfolio. It's very small, very focused, and it's kind of what I've always wanted to be doing at this point in my career. So I'm very happy here, and really feel very optimistic and promising about what the future holds for us here as well.
Nice. So obviously you fell in love with Pinot Noir in New Zealand. So did you, so of course, New Zealand is big on the Sauvignon Blanc as well. So what made you steer away from that and more towards Pinot?
Yeah, I mean, I think my experience with producers of Pinot Noir, all of them were so good, and it sort of felt like it's a very small group that is in a very big world of wine. Yeah, and they're a very sharing group, and I guess the more Pinot Noir winemakers I met, and the more I saw the different styles of Pinot Noir and the different things that you can do with it from each different site, it really captivated my attention, and it has, ever since, really, because again, it makes up like 2 or 3% of the wine world, so it's very, very small, and very selective, and it isn't grown everywhere like Cabernet and Chardonnay and whatnot. It requires specific sites and attention to detail, some good farming, and all of these things I'm drawn to about the varietal. And continue to be as excited about making great Pinot Noir as I was when I first started at Atarangi.
Yeah, that's what matters. And I mean, kudos to you, because Pinot Noir can be a bitchy little grape to work with, so yeah, kudos to you for sticking with it. And And we're going to talk a little bit more about, you mentioned this whole site specific and terroir, and we're going to talk about that more once we get into tasting the Pinot,
Sure.
because I think that's, you really captured it, because I think that so many of the wineries in the Okanagan are trying to be all things to all people, and
Absolutely.
you can't do that. And in order to put Canada on the winemaking map, so to speak, we have to do what we're good at, and we have to do what grows best in the areas that we're situated in. So
absolutely. That seems to me that it's kind of, I've had the luxury of seeing that development in New Zealand and in Oregon, and indeed in California, where people are gravitating to the right places, the right sites. And one thing that I would add about Pinot Noir that kind of has attracted me to it is that the winemaking group that are involved, because we're small and we're from different little places in the world, from Chile and from all, very small, select little spots. We all come together at various events and workshops and kind of learn from each other. There's been a great kind of sharing developments across the board from, across countries and across regions. And that part of it has been very fulfilling for me, for sure.
Mm. Nice, excellent. Okay, so let's talk about the Riesling. Let's move into the Riesling. So we've got the 2018 Riesling here.
Yes.
So I believe we're a vintage behind here, what you're actually pouring at the winery, correct?
That's right. Yeah. Sure.
So,
but the 18 is notable for its awards. It was the white wine of the year at the All Canadian Wine Championships, which sort of put us on the map for Riesling. Awards are great. There's a lot of them. We all submit our wines, but when you win the trophy, you need to take that seriously. So it was the best white wine of the year, that wine. And I recall that we a little bit in that we allowed some skin contact in this wine, which we hadn't done before. It represents a new move, a new style in a way. Previously, it was just a whole bunch pressed wine. So now we're skin contacting it, and part of the blend has some nice skin depth and some weight from that skin contact, which is 24 hours.
Yeah, I noticed that on the 2019 tech sheet. I was like, oh, skin contact. That's really cool. Yeah. So, but this one is the whole bunch pressed, because this is the 2018.
Yeah, the 18. Gotcha.
Yeah, so this is a nice off-dry Riesling right now, and it's a great price, $24.99, and it's on sale right now during this virtual tasting and for the next week for $22.49. That's an amazing price for a great quality Riesling. So you can see this, the really typical light lemon color here of our Riesling. It's got that hint of petrol on it. How old are the vines, Grant?
The vines these are about, actually quite similar to the Pinot Noir that's planted in here. They're planted in 2008, and they're from the Moselle clone 220, the originals here. A lot of old plantings of that, but it's certainly been a great clone for surviving winter and, continuing to produce lovely wines. I actually make a sweet wine as well with the same grapes.
Okay.
A dessert wine. And so it's very versatile. The thing I love that all winemakers love about Riesling is the low pH, and the acidity is really what drives the wine. There's a lot of tension between the acid and this kind of genuine residual sweetness that's there. So that's the trick, I think, with winemaking and Riesling, is to kind of balance that tension, the push and the pull from the acid and the sweetness, and all of the other stuff really just comes naturally with the Okanagan here, that we have the great cooler night temperatures around harvest that kind of keep the fruit from becoming overripe. You can just hang it there and let a little bit of botrytis set in. There is always a 5 or 10% botrytis in Riesling. I like to keep it as long as possible. It's the last white wine that we pick on the property, just because the grapes are bulletproof and you can kind of hang it out there as long as you like. Style-wise, the whole bunch certainly represents what I call overt fruitiness. There's lots of lime and lots of orchard fruits, and it's really which apple, dependent on the season, which apple you're going to kind of have there. Is it going to be Granny Smith, or is it going to be something like Fuji, a little more tropical and a little more fun? But they they're beautiful wines. Riesling is actually a Pinot Noir lover's wine because it is based around the acidity more than anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, isn't that the beauty of Riesling, though, right? Like you're saying, push and pull between the sweetness and the acidity. And I mean, I love that, racy acidity. The zippier, the better.
Absolutely, yeah. Although I have to say, consumers, I was making a lot of Riesling at Quailsgate, and when you're making, consumers have a hard time with Riesling because they're never really sure if it's dry or sweet.
Exactly.
And it kind of gets a bad rap, a lot of very, very overtly sweet Rieslings out there, and people just kind of go, ooh, I'm not sure what I'm going to get. And I know there's been a lot of talk about having that identified on the label beyond the kind of basic sweetness code of 1, 2, or 0 or whatever. But, for me, I think the balance of this wine is kind of, shows off the best of the Okanagan. That you can still see all the weight and the fruit there without it being kind of overcome with cloying sweetness. But the acidity also, from an aging point of view, the acidity and the cap on the bottle. I'm drinking some beautiful old Rieslings that I made at Quailsgate in 2006 and 2007 at home. And because of the acidity, these wines will last forever. Like, they are just keepers. So if you're able to kind of hang on to them in the cellar, buy a case, and keep kind of having a look at them, you'll easily get 20 years out of these wines, and they do get better.
Yeah, and that's amazing. Plus, they're under screw cap, so that keeps the freshness even more than if it was under cork. So definitely something to keep in mind. Riesling, a very ageable grape, an ageable wine, and I totally underline that here. Sell it for a decade or two. I love that.
Sell it for a decade or two. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So, again, on sale for $22.49. Like, again, super easy to buy a case at this price. And like Grant said, experiment. Like, just, keep it for 5 years and then open one. Keep it for 7 years, open another one, and just see how it evolves. I mean, that's the beauty of Riesling in that regard. So.
Yeah, it's a good food pair. You can drink that. It's not a wine that I kind of recommend to be just sipping on its own. The acidity will get on top of you in no time at all. You're better off having food with this wine, or something like even light salads, or something vinaigrette-like, or anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
spicy food, some Thai,
spicy food,
some sushi, like anything like that would be great with your Riesling. So. Awesome. Okay, so I want to do the Chardonnay last, because when I tasted these with Renaissance, we did the Pinots last, and I felt they kind of got lost under the Chardonnay. So we're going to do the Pinot first.
Sure. Good plan. Right after the Riesling, we cleansed our palate with the Riesling, and now we're moving on to the series.
Yes, exactly. So this is the Golden Retreat Pinot Noir. Again, we are the 2018, and I was at your winery just this past September. So it's been 10 months since I've been out there, and I actually got to taste a lot of the Pinots that you make, and so it was a great opportunity for me again to sort of taste this terroir, this sense of place that we were talking about previously, and interestingly enough, of course, my favorite, the most expensive, the Cuvée.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's tough when you have rich taste, but that's how it goes, for sure. And not surprising, because the single vineyards wines sort of have the ability to kind of show off the terroir, and they each appeal to different people and different palates. And you're lucky when you have the opportunity to taste them all side by side. You really see that picture very much more clear than if you're just looking at a wine single-handed. I mean, the beautiful thing about this wine is that it comes from far from here. It's from Summerland, effectively, from the district overlooking the lake. The soils are very different than what we have here. They're sort of sandy loam, very, very free draining soils, so not a lot of vigor in the vines. They're farmed beautifully by a fellow called David Kuzuki, who's been farming this area since we've been purchasing the fruit by contract for over a decade now. And what I find that's most different about this, that again is soil driven and climate driven. It's a little warmer than the East Kelowna site, so it definitely has some real, what I think is kind of some ripe characters, some dark fruits. I really love the extraction. in that it's a big wine, but it's not tannic in any way. It's of all the single vineyards, it has more textures, more layers. And I really like it sort of savory. It's not a fruity wine. It's more in the savory camp. There's some mushroom and some forest flora and some fun stuff going on there.
Totally.
And the clone of note in here, we're working with 8 different clones now across all the different vineyards. A lot of them are Dijon clones, which are the kind of modern small berry pine cone shaped Pinot Noir clones that arrived here in the 90s. But this one is from a much older clone, or a good portion of this is from the Pommard clone, which has its origins in Pommard, of course. But then a lot of the New Zealand industry is based on the Pommard clone. There's a huge amount of plantings in California and Oregon on Pommard, and it's known as the meaty clone with lots of texture.
The more robust,
exactly.
for sure. But it's it's very aromatic, because I mean, even it's sitting here, I didn't even have it at my nose, and I could just, the aromas were just wafting out of the glass here. So
Totally.
And I always get that, that bit of flintiness that comes from Pinot. It's just that quintessential note. It's like, oh, it's a Pinot, as soon as you put your nose in it, before you get anything else, that sort of that flinty, that that bit of pink pearl eraser on the end of your pencil, that kind of thing. It's like, oh, that's a Pinot.
Totally. Yeah, no, I really like that Pommard clone. I've planted a fair bit of it here on this site since I've been here, and we're looking forward to working with that here on this site and seeing how that works well.
A little bit of spicy characteristic in this Pinot as well.
Yep. Lots of spice. The barrel program was, the fun thing about the single vineyard wines, and indeed the cuvee as well, is they're all kind of quintessentially made the same in the winery. So what you're tasting in the glass is very much, site driven.
Yeah.
Because I'm not doing anything different to them. They're all the wines are cold soaked for a minimum of 7 days. So we have the luxury of free refrigeration here in October when we're in harvest. We just put things outside and they get very, very cold, which inhibits fermentation. And so we're basically sitting these vats of crushed grapes with a lot of whole berry and maybe 5 to 10% whole bunches, just sitting there for about 7 to 10 days, just kind of soaking up flavor and color in an aqueous solution. And then we bring them inside, we warm them up, and they begin to ferment spontaneously because we have a lot of wild yeast living in the building now. And, it was difficult in the first year when we moved in here in 2018. We didn't have a lot of resident yeast population. We waited a long time for things to happen in the fermentation, but they eventually did. But now it's easy. You just warm things up to 18 degrees and they go boom. And so this is about a total of about close to 21 to 26 days total time on skins. And then the wines are moved into French oak barrels. I'm using about 4 different coopers that all source the wood from the center of France, from the forests of Allier and Tronchet.
Yeah. So are you destemming then, or like with your whole?
We destem about as I say, about 90% of the fruit is destemmed. Okay. And then 10% is whole bunches, and we're selecting the whole. They're selecting the whole bunches from the harvest, so that the element that we're using for whole bunches are the ripest stems that we have.
Okay.
Because you really want lignified stems for this style, so you have really nice tannins, not aggressive tannins coming from that process. I've seen stems that literally glow in the dark when they come through the crusher, and you definitely don't want to be sitting on those for 3 weeks.
For sure.
Yeah. So that element varies from to vintage depending on ripeness, it's a really nice way of kind of having a full round palette of tannin.
Yeah, and you're always using natural ferment. You're not using any cultured at all?
No, not at all. No, not with Pinot. I use a lot of cultured ferment in white wines, just to have the control and the peace of mind. But with Pinot, most of the fermentation activity is controlled by temperature. It's very sensitive to temperature, and so if you have good temperature control with good Pinots, the yeast will always find their way.
Do its thing. That's good.
Yeah. So the one other thing that I'm doing that's quite interesting, it's quite different, and I kind of learned this process in New Zealand, and I really appreciate, what it does to the wine, is we conduct the primary fermentation obviously at harvest and over harvest and right into November. But then we move all the wines once they're in barrel, we move them up to the cellar. And very lucky that the cellar is a little bit underground or mostly underground, and we were able to hold a temperature there for all of winter at below 10 degrees Celsius. And what that does is it inhibits any kind of microbial activity. The wines are unprotected by sulfur or SO2 at this time, so they need cold temperature and they need low pH to kind of protect them. And then in April, when things sort of warm up a little bit, we kind of warm things and get the malolactic fermentation to happen in the springtime. Okay. And this has the effect of kind of allowing the wines to sit, to kind of knit and come together before they get rushed into that next fermentation. It also reduces the amount of total sulfur that you're needing to use by about half. So nice. Hugely significant. The average sort of free SO2, total SO2 combination in wines, in the Okanagan is 200 parts. And all of these wines are sitting at around 60 or 70 when they go to bottle. So for people who are sensitive to, histamine issues, I hear a lot of people drinking red wine and getting runny eyes and teary eyes and runny noses.
Stuffy nose.
Yeah, and sulfur is, sulfur is like one of those great compounds. It's a natural organic compound, but if you use too much of it, it kills flavor, it kills aroma, and it doesn't make your body feel too good. So I'm very proud of the fact that all the wines, don't give you a headache unless you drink too much of them.
This is true. Nice. So just one more question on the Pinots. So the different, like the Coyote, the Golden Retreat, and what's the other?
The Saddle Block from the
Saddle Block. So do the grapes look different?
Well, they're all they're very similar clonal makeup. They're all those vineyards, all the single vineyards, just happen to have been planted in the same year in 2008. So they have clonal similarities. They have obviously vine age similarities. The winemaking is the same. What makes them different is, without a doubt, each site seasonally gives you kind of different shape of grapes. You have some bigger berry, some smaller berry. I find the Saddle Block is always the most dense, kind of jammy, most powerful, fruity kind of the three, because it has absolutely minuscule berries. It never has any big berries, and you have a very high skin to pulp ratio in the ferment, which kind of drives that kind of dried fruit character and lots of
tannin.
Skin and tannin. Yeah, but the tannins are always in check with the wines here. I'm always pleasantly surprised that some places, some sites that I made Pinots at Quailsgate produced just vicious tannins that took a lot of time to kind of resolve in the bottle or in the fermenter. Some of them required fining. And now I'm just grateful that I'm working with sites, and some of the methods that we're using with cooler ferments seems to have kind of beaten the tannin problem with a lot of Pinots have in the Okanagan, where Pinots should not be tannic. They need to be kind of more generous and lots of body, but without the harsh tannin that you would see in a Merlot or a Cabernet or something.
Right.
When I see those types of things, I think that's not Pinot Noir. They should be soft and luscious right from the get-go.
I agree. Yes, I agree. Okay, so this is $41.99 on sale right now for $37.79, again, until the end of next week. So, in fact, we might be one of the only stores that has this Golden Retreat out here in Sherwood Park or in the side of Edmonton. So come pick up your bottle. It's amazing. And if you've got those Riedel Pinot glasses, it'll taste even better in one of those. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Glass is crucial.
Yeah. All right, last but certainly not least, and I have to tell you, Grant, this is like literally, I'm not a Chardonnay girl at all, but this is one of my absolute favorite Chardonnays. This was my Christmas wine. I had it with my Christmas dinner last, the ugly Christmas of 2020. When you couldn't have anybody to your
the
house.
lonely Christmas of 2020.
Yeah. But this was my Christmas wine. This is the 2017 Chardonnay called Clone 95. So obviously Clone 95, a Burgundian clone.
A Burgundy clone. Again, I was very fortunate. Quailsgate had a lot of vineyards and a lot of young Chardonnay that was developed and planted here in the kind of 80s and 90s. Ben Stewart was kind of instrumental in bringing a lot of plant material here from France and putting it in the ground. And I had the joy of getting to ferment them all separately and decide which one I liked the best. And so the Clone 95 always stood out as being Stewart Family Reserve potential every year. It's very consistent. It crops low, so you don't need a lot of thinning and crop adjustment. Exposure is very important with the Chardonnay to get the skins nice and yellow. But there's a good chunk over Chardonnay, one at Quailsgate and then at 50th Parallel from the same vineyard in Naramata, run by Graham and Iris Duncan. And so it's a long-standing arrangement. And Graham always says, I follow the winemakers. So wherever I've gone, I've taken his fruit with me, and I brought it here to Spearhead in 2017. The first time it's been in the Chardonnay here. And I guess ratio-wise, it's about 85% of the source material is coming from Graham's vineyard, from the Duncan Vineyard in Naramata. It's a beautiful site. He farms it immaculately year after year. What can I say? This wine is all about the many tricks. It's a very fruity wine, but it also has a lot of layers. And Chardonnay is kind of a winemaker style wine because we get to decide the barrel, how much lees, how much malolactic, all the different characteristics you can really drive in the wine. And so this one in particular is one of my favorites as well. I drink it at home on a regular basis. Really love the kind of butterscotch caramel kind of
like an apricot kernel and like some toasted pineapple and there's just a lot going on in here.
So, it's a great movie theater wine because it's got all that butter and popcorn going on there. It'll make great food pairing for movie theaters when they start letting you bring bottles of wine in there. That'll be the next big allowance here. The French oak is a big part of the game as well here. We're using a barrel from the center of France made by D&J, Darnoy Jagle. And they're a cooper that bends and creates the barrel with steam as opposed to fire. Okay. So a particular brand of barrel. And what you get is kind of more delicate, more spiciness, less smoke. There's no smoke in the wine. I don't like smoky barrel wines. So I really think all the little pieces that come together make this such a great wine. And it's very smooth. It's creamy. It has wonderful textures. It's definitely house wine for me. And we've been kind of playing since this vintage in 2019. We made a single vineyard wine. We separated the Duncan fruit from the estate fruit here and went kind of down a similar track to what we're doing with Pinot Noir to show, the potential of this site here and then see, what the Naramata fruit looks like just on its own. And so things are progressing, but the wines are very similar year after year because the fruit source is the same and the winemaking is the same. And I really love the style of this wine. I think it has the potential to turn a lot of people back to Chardonnay that maybe got kind of scared of Chardonnay. It was a little bit, California and woody and cedar planky and that. And this has kind of got the barrel there, but it's not smothering the fruit.
Yeah, I agree. And this is your first vintage of Spearhead Chardonnay.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So again, it's just very mouth filling, but then there's, it's a clean finish. And so a linear finish for me. And like you said, many layers, which is awesome. And yeah, this was definitely, I love this wine. I recommend this wine a lot.
A lot. Yeah. Well, we have our agent, Renaissance Winery, whenever we talk to them about the wines, and how things are going in sales. Of course, they've been literally zero for restaurants in the last year, so that's a pretty quick conversation with them. But Jason, one of the managers of the business in Alberta, said, well, even if nobody else is buying them, I'm buying like a case a week. And I said, well, that's probably enough to meet your quotas if you just do it yourself. So it's a favorite with many folks, and we find that the best thing to do with this wine is to get it tasted, because people's preconceived ideas of what a beautiful Chardonnay looks like change completely when they have it in their mouth.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, people that are going for, those big buttery Napa cabs, and, I've had people like, well, I want something different. And I'm like, have you tried some Canadian Chardonnay?
Totally. Well, I'm told that it's a category. I'm told by the agents and people selling wine, and you probably know this yourself, that once you get into a price point, $25 to $35 with Chardonnay, a lot of people just move away from BC and they just go straight to Sonoma and California, because they think that that's the go-to place for that price point. And so I know several real nice Okanagan Chardonnays along with this one that are actually quite hard to sell because of that situation where people are like, well, if I'm going to spend $30 on a Chardonnay, I'm going to do it in the USA.
Yeah. Well, this one's $34.99, so we're still at that 35 threshold. Yep. On sale right now for $31.49. So those of you watching, if you're curious about Canadian Chardonnay, any of these wines here, please come into the store, pick them up while they're on sale, and then I can guarantee you your minds will be changed about Pinot Noir, about Canadian Riesling, and about Canadian Chardonnay. So this has been very insightful for me. Grant, thank you so much for speaking to me today.
It's a pleasure. I'm so looking forward to getting back to the market in Edmonton and Calgary in the next, probably be out for a visit in August. Very pleased that everything's opening up and we get to see people's faces again.
I know.
And, it's just fabulous. So I look forward to seeing you personally again in August.
You as well. Have a great day, rest of your day, and hopefully you don't get trampled on by those horses. And
stay away from the movie people.
All right, Grant. Thanks. Cheers.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.